Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number 7112-646. This is what's called a spring pivot, a surface type, steel base, adjustable tension, satin nickel plated. So in this video we're going to review the contents of the box. We're going to go over what's included. We're going to look at the installation instructions. We're going to talk about what it's for, where you use the item. Okay. So basically, this is a quite robust version of a gate hinge or a cafe door hinge, or a louver door hinge. You will see all sorts of variants of hardware that will take a small door, like a saloon door, cafe door, half door, louver doors, what they're generally called. And some of them are quite inexpensive and operated by gravity. When the door opens, it will actually, rise up, and then gravity will bring it back to center. It will come back and settle at center. There are certainly lots of different, available options of that in the market. Bommer does make a gravity style of that, both standard and hold open. But when you really need some control over the unit or control over the door, meaning you can adjust the spring tension, or you have a door that exceeds the very light, range of those gravity style pivots, which, is for incredibly light doors, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, that sort of stuff. When you have something that's heavier, as in like an actual door that is just about 40-inch tall, that's going to weigh every bit of 50 pounds, you get into the 7110 series material, like this. Now, where you're going to see these very often is in libraries, where they absolutely have to have a unit that is going to be considered quite substantial and robust to handle it. You will see them in courtrooms is where you'll also see these. Those little half doors where the gallery sits and, where business is transacted up front. You'll see these all the time used in those applications. And that's where you're going to see this, okay? They say surface mounted. That's because it's mounted to the surface of the jamb. And this, of course, is the bottom portion. This contains the spring mechanism, okay? Allows you to attach it to your door will sit on top of here, allowing you to attach it to your door. Again, your jamb is over here. There's going to be a top pivot assembly that goes with this naturally, okay? That's the jamb portion. That is the, this is the door portion, okay? So your installation is going to look like that, top and bottom. Then the balance of what's left in here really is just the screw package. And, of course, the tension wrench, which we'll get to when we talk about the installation instructions. You're going to have... total of 10 screws, making sure we had all the screws. 3 for the jamb, 2 for the door portion up here, then the same on the top portion. 3 for the jamb, and then 2 for the top of the door. There are 3 screws that are finished in satin nickel type color. Those would go up at the top pivot because that will be exposed. If you're going to see any screws, you'd see it at the top pivot. You really won't see those screws exposed at all at the bottom pivot. You're not going to end up seeing those. The 7110 series from Bommer is a particular unit in that you would be best served by just literally following the installation instructions. Don't alter anything unless it's specifically stated, because this unit is particular in the fact that it's already come out ready for setting tension after it's installed. Do not release tension on this hinge completely. Mount hinge on door with tension pin in place at the factory setting. So let's go over some basic dimensional properties of this item, and then we're going to get into the extended description of the item, meaning the installation instructions. So overall height of the top portion, overall height of the bottom portion to the jamb, about 2 1/4, and its width about 1 1/4 inches. The overall height of the unit from what's called the boss all the way down to the bottom of the unit appears to be about 4 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so it's not small, plus it's not light. This weighs over 3.5 pounds. Overall width about 5 1/4 or so. The top pivot assembly overall is about 2.5, with a width at about 1 1/4 inches. Okay, up at the top it's a bit tapered, comes down to about 1 1/8 inches. Overall height about 2 1/4. I don't know if I gave that to you twice. Okay, then we have our installation instructions, and we have our screw package and our tension wrench. Of course, we're going to need that tension wrench. For every pivot that you order, there will be a tension wrench included. Okay, so let's take a look at the installation instructions. And what we'll do now is we will switch to the screen view where we can take a look at these installation instructions together and go over the particular way in which this is installed in a step-by-step fashion. So this is the item that we are working on, the 7112 and a 646 finish. We're going to look at the template, the installation instructions, then the product catalog. And by the time you're seeing this video, there will be a link here called product catalog. But first, the template. This will give you the dimensional properties of the item, but also give you dimensions in terms of how you are to prepare the door. So the 7110 is different than the 7120 in the sense that the 7110 is surface mounted down here. They also have a model that's intended to be mortised to the bottom of the door, okay, where you're going to obviously make a very large preparation in the bottom of your door to accommodate the body. I've seen it both ways installed, but I will tell you that the surface mount version, the 7110, 7112 is just simply more common. Not sure why, other than, there's less work to do on your door in terms of prepping it. And plus, you've got, if you're going to take a standard particle board door and you're going to cut all that section out of it, that's not going to be considered, proper door construction in order for that to work. So that's probably why you see it that way. Okay, so in terms of installation instructions, here's a really great little overview. And what they're showing here is that vertical line of pivoting needs to be completely plumb. That's going to be a reference to of course, the center line of the top pivot. Okay. All the way down through the center line of the boss and all the way down through the unit. That needs to be perfectly plumb. And it is, well, of course, when you install this material per the template. They're giving us the dimensions of the hardware that we've kind of already touched on for top and bottom of the portion. Now, what we have not really discussed is this radius that they are requiring to have on the edge of the door. A 1 5/16 maximum radius on the edge of the door for clearance. So that makes for a really large roundover bit. That'd be a 2 5/8 diameter roundover bit. So you need to put a radius on the edge of the door with a maximum radius of 1 5/16. That needs to be rounded over. I've had people that have used, 3/4 inch radius roundover bits. You need to break that edge, is what they're saying, and it cannot be any greater of a radius than 1 5/16. So there's a small amount of flexibility there. The issue is that this does require having a roundover bit. And if you do enough of this work, you'll probably want to purchase the larger size bit because that same sort of radius flows through the rest of the Bommer line when it comes to rounding radius, rounding over, and putting a radius on both sides of the door. If you think of the top row of tile in a bathroom that would have a bowl nose on it, that would be a round over. But when you do it on both sides of the door, it becomes a radiused door edge. Special consideration needs to be given to this as well. And what I mean is, if you just study or think about in your mind's eye just this one section here, you can easily run into a situation where you might have some unintended consequences. And what I mean is, if we were going to just quickly replicate what our door looks like, okay, we know that if this is a veneered door, you're going to have your veneer. You'll have 2 layers or 3 layers, cross-banding, and then a backer. You'll have these very different layers that are happening here. Okay, veneer, cross-banding, and backer. Now, when you go through and you take a radius off the door, what you're really doing is you are accentuating, okay, what you're going to see as you radius through this. So this area here, and this area right here, you're accentuating how large that is, and you're going to see that. So if you're going to take a solid core, birch, oak, cherry, whatever the veneer is, doesn't matter, but you're going to see the cross-banding and backer when you round that over. So be mindful that is, if you're painting the door, you have no problem. But if you are, let's say that this is cherry, you're not going to want to see these alternating dark, very dark, bands on the edge of the door. And you'll have that on both scenarios, on both sides. So we need to be mindful of what that looks like. And as a woodworker, assuming you're, possibly a woodworker, or if you're not, contending with that is what's necessary. Having a veneer that will wrap over and around would be a solution. But that needs to be thought through when you are just going to radius this. Because doors are never solid. They can be. Doors are usually never solid lumber where you're going to radius through that and it will be graceful and beautiful. It's generally laminated construction that we're dealing with. So be mindful of that. Putting a radius on the door is not difficult. You just need the tool. I've always used a good size router bit for doing that. 2.5 horse, a large router, a 2.5 horse router. And I do have a very large, I don't recall the radius or the diameter of my round over bit. It's 2.5 inch or something like that. And the base on my router I have literally modified. I've cut it out so I could fit that giant bit down through there. And I would just set the depth of that so my bearing and where my carbide edge ends up puts me right in the center of the thickness of the door. So I'm getting a really nice, elegant round over on that preparation. And what I'll do is I'll have the door down on sawhorses and I will run my radius down one edge. I'll only make 2 passes. I don't believe you need, one is just to make the prep, and then the second is to clear off any sort of inconsistency that you have. If you've tipped the router a bit, you don't want to rock it back and forth at all, because you will unintentionally route material away that you don't want to route away. A second pass is only for cleaning, and you want to make sure that when you get to the edge of the door that you exit straight off and not push back. You don't want to round over. You don't want to be rounding this way and then take off any portion of this part of the door. Once you have a radius done on the edge of certainly your pivot style, and you don't have to do it on both sides of the door, although if you do, you will be able to have a tighter clearance, most certainly. After you have the radius done on the pivot style, you have to decide if you'll do it on the opposite end as well. The reason that we say that is because, if you have a 3/8 of an inch clearance on this side, what will you have on the opposite side? Do you want to just simply design it so that it is even? The margin between the door and the jamb is even on both sides. And you may simply want to make it symmetrical, so you'll undersize your door accordingly. Round over or don't. If you're going to leave a 3/8 clearance on your opposite style, you will not need to round that over. That'll be plenty of clearance with a square edge door. And generally, you're going to see them as square edge doors. In my opinion, you're going to see it exactly like this. As they see here, 3/16 would be the minimum clearance to accommodate a square edge door. If you were to radius that door edge, it'll certainly be 1/8 of an inch. Not more than that is all you would need. So you'll need to decide what you're going to do on that margin over here. In terms of mortising the door, it's fairly easy at this point. You have nothing other than the preparation required in the top of the door for the plate as seen here. And you can see that that's 7/8 of an inch on the outside dimension. If you were to take a Forstner bit and at these 3 points drill it the thickness of the plate, which is quite thin, at must be here somewhere. The depth of that preparation is what I'm looking for. I don't see that. How thick that item is. Not meant to be surface mounted, that's for sure. Well, that top portion is what's called a 7890, and we can pull up we can do a search for 7890, and we're dealing only with this one portion here. But I do not see the thickness of that. Okay, so we obviously have it here, and I can put my caliper on it. I can tell you the thickness of the plate is 0.143, 143 thousandths thick. If you were to make it 1/8 of an inch, or just heavy on, obviously just marginally heavy on 1/8, your preparation would work well. Then they're going to want a 1/2 inch hole that's going to be drilled, 5/8 deep for that pin to come down, which is in the top portion of the pivot. That's the only preparation at the top of the door. The bottom of the door just requires this prep for the boss in it at inch and a quarter from the edge of the door to the center line, and then 1 inch diameter. Apparently is what that is, down in the center of the door. So from the edge of the door over to the center of that prep for the boss, which will be 1 inch diameter, is inch and a quarter from the edge of the door. And other than that, there's nothing else to do to prep this door. Okay? Because it's a surface mount model. So that pretty much wraps up talking about how to prep the door. In terms of the height, that's obviously, whatever you're going to make the height is what that will end up being. We've talked about how to account for the width of the door. You'll need 3/8 here. You're going to need at least 3/16 here with a square edge door. You might make it 3/8 as well. You might radius both styles of the door and make it a little bit tighter over here. But again, square edge is pretty common for what I see. Now, back to the item that we're working on. We'll get to the instructions. But first, let's jump over to the product catalog. And we can find that currently, the link to the manufacturer's page. That will allow us to click on the product catalog here. And when that document comes up, what you can do is you can perform a find function on the keyboard for 7112, and you'll get to the page where that can be located. Gives you an overview of these pivots. So the 7100 series is a surface mount. Okay, they have a 7112 steel surface version. They have the 7122, which is the mortise version. They are non-handed, they are adjustable spring tension, they are double acting, and they have a steel base material. Okay, 3 foot width, 2.5 inch maximum thickness. A minimum door thickness, I would think you're going to want to be looking at, how wide is the bottom plate, which they don't give us because it is surface mounted. how wide is that plate at the bottom, the tongue that that door sits on, and measuring it in front of me here. It's less than an inch. So, an 1 3/8 door is going to work on this. I don't think you're going to have a door that's thinner than that. So 1 3/8 to inch and 3/8 to 2.5. Well, any door thickness is really going to work, but when they refer to thickness, they're talking about the diameter of this body. So just be mindful, how thick of something you're going to install is going to be related to that radius that you put on the door. They don't really give us a minimum and maximum door range, except here, door thickness, 1 inch to 2.5. It's one of those things that you're looking at the limitations of the hardware and realizing, okay, well, how thin can I stick something on here? Yeah, 1 inch does make sense. You can go up to 2.5 inch to make that work as well. Okay, and coincidentally, the outside diameter of that body is also 2.5. So that's probably where that dimension is coming in from. They have a clamp style version, which I've seen that used in the past. If you were to have a type of door construction that is not going to permit or really make a installation such that with screws coming from the bottom would give you a safe, proper installation, you can clamp this onto the edge of the door. They obviously will need to know the thickness of the door specifically to manufacture those clamps. Now, they make all of the same material in a... then they have this clamp style for the jamb as well. Then they make all the same material in a brass-based material. So they can do all of this in brass. The one we're specifically looking at is steel. So the difference really there is only in what the material is made of, which will yield an end result when it comes to the finish that may be more in tune with what you require. So what I mean to say is satin nickel on a steel base material, such as the one we're working on, that finish code is 646. That will look differently than a brass-based material in a satin nickel finish, which would be called 619. So depending on how important your finish requirement is, that will determine which model that you use. 7312 619 is going to be considered most certainly more expensive than our steel-based material. So that's really the other portion of this. It will certainly be more expensive, and the question is, is that additional upcharge of, let's say, 25% worth the base material being an architectural material like brass, so that you can get a true architectural finish on it, rather than a process done over steel. Steel is more common, probably because it's just simply less expensive, but that doesn't go to say that we don't sell the brass version, because we do. We sell both. And then again, variations of this clamp material, clamping the door and the jamb. Just because we're here, the inexpensive gravity style pivots, the 7512 and the 7512H, can be done, and that's just gravity style, both hold open and non-hold open is what all that is. Now, skipping over to the instructions. The instructions, and I skipped back to the manufacturer's page. Hopefully you don't need to read this reactivation. And generally what happens when people need to reactivate their pivot is when they've not followed the installation instructions exactly, and they've removed tension. So let's dive into the installation instructions, which are here. Now, as we move into the installation instructions portion, so the bottom line is that whole reactivating of the bottom pivot. If you don't remove the tension on this unit prior to installation, you won't need to look into that at all. Apparently, from what I gather, is there are so many people who adjust that tension immediately because they conclude without looking at the installation instructions that removing the tension needs to be done to install it. That's probably because with so many other Bommer products that are spring-loaded, you need to remove the tension to install it, okay? So that's, in everyone's defense, that's why that's happening. However, not with this style. So let's look at the installation instructions. So, number one, and I'm guilty of not reading the installation instructions initially all the time either. If it's a lock, I'm not reading the installation instructions. I've seen most manufacturers of locks. I've installed them, blah blah blah. However, every once in a while you try to put one back together and it just won't go. And when all else fails, read the installation instructions. And sometimes I learn something new, and that happened to me not too very long ago. Caution: do not remove tension pin from adjustable type pivots prior to installation. If tension pin is removed, this could cause failure of the pivot to close the door in one or both directions. Call Bommer for instructions to reactivate it, or just simply dump into the product catalog and get over to that page, which is page SP5, where you can see all of that. Okay. Step 1, installation of top jam bracket. Locate top jam bracket at correct height and secure to the jam. Okay. Put it, in the center of your cased opening frame, would be my guess. But mark it, pre-drill the holes, and physically attach it. Step 2, door preparation. Make the radius on the door edge. Mortise the top pivot socket into the top of the door. If it's a mortise style, mortise the bottom of your door. If it's not, drill the bottom boss, and if it is, drill the bottom boss. Prep into the bottom of the door. Secure the pivot to the door with center of spindle aligned with center of hole and top socket. So that needs to be, they're talking about this vertical axis of pivoting. That needs to be plumb, not only in an elevation view, but in a cross-section view as well. So if you looked at the door from the right side, it needs to be centered, or at least in the correct vertical axis. Step 3, installation of bottom jam bracket. So right now you have this attached to the jam. This you can attach to the door. You have done any mortising. Well, you've done any mortising. That's number 1. Then you've attached this. You've attached this. Attach this, but you'll notice the bottom jam bracket at this moment is not attached, except that at this moment you're now going to attach it. When it comes out of the box, this will be placed onto the bottom spindle with the washer and the nut, but very much only hand tight. It will be intentionally hand tight. Attach the bottom jam bracket to the pivot on door. Okay, get this installed to the door. Get this installed down to the spindle with the washer and nut, but just tighten it so it doesn't fall off, and that it's hand tight only, and only 25% hand tight. Locate and mark correct position. Okay, attach bottom jam bracket to the pivot on door. Attach nut hand tight. Do not tighten with a wrench. Don't do that. Locate and mark correct position on jam for bottom jam bracket by placing door in the opening with the top pivot pin in the top pivot socket and top surface of door held tightly against top jam bracket. So this gets installed onto the spring pivot. You're going to take the entire door, get it into the opening, and push the door tight against the top of this. And there's a reason why, which we'll go over in a moment. Okay. You're going to locate and mark the jam. Okay, get it in the opening, locate and mark the jam. Remove the door from the opening. Take the bottom jam bracket off of the pivot, and then attach the bottom jam bracket to the jam. Okay. Now you're going to get the door into the opening. You have the first thing you need to do is to remove the top pivot pin, which is this, using a screwdriver. You can do that. That is threaded, and that will come out of your top pivot. Place door and bottom opening, inserting the spindle into the bottom bracket. You'll have enough room to slide that door in there by getting the spindle into the hole in the bottom bracket. Okay, then bringing that door into the opening. And then you're going to put the top pivot pin back down through the top pivot into the top pivot socket that's installed in the door. Okay, that's all this section here. With the door in the closed position, place the washer and nut on the spindle and tighten securely. Before you do that, position the door exactly where you want it by lifting it slightly and positioning it so that it's completely centered, because there are splines here. When you place the washer and spindle and tighten securely, you're going to draw the splines on the spindle into the bottom jam bracket, permanently marking those with those splines. You will then tighten it securely. You'll use a wrench at this point. And then your installation's done. So holding it tight to the top jam bracket is important, because as you tighten this, you're going to draw that down, and then you're going to achieve that 1/16 of an inch margin that they call out right here. So you're going to pull that door down a little bit when you tighten it. Now, assuming that you will need to adjust some tension, to change the closing power, insert the tension rod into the tension collar. Turn counterclockwise when you're looking at it from the bottom up. Okay? And what you'll do is you will remove the tension pin. You're going to turn it counterclockwise slightly, remove the tension pin while you're holding the tension rod under tension. Turn that tension rod even further to reveal a new hole. Insert your tension pin. Okay? And that's how you adjust the tension. Reinsert tension pin and tension collar at hole location required to obtain the desired amount of tension. And then at that point, your installation is complete. Now, if you were to install that, if you were to begin an installation and really skip all of this and remove that tension, you're very likely going to have to review the conversation here. Now, on how to reactivate that pivot, what we're looking at is if it's been removed. If a pivot fails to close the door in one or both direction, the unit can be reactivated as follows. Remove the pin from the tension collar. Okay. Remove the pivot from the door and bracket. So remove the pivot from the door and bracket. So I would say what we're doing here is let's unscrew this, remove the nut and washer, lift it up and out, and you're probably going to have to tap that up, I would think, with a mallet to get it up and out the way that it came in. I would be, of course, be removing the top pin as well. Remove the top pivot, remove the pivot from the door and bracket. Viewing the pivot from the threaded end from the bottom, see figure 1. And with the mounting bracket toward you, turn the tension collar to the left counterclockwise until it comes to a stop. Hold the tension collar in this position while turning the threaded spindle to the right clockwise until it stops. So what you're going to find is that there will be no tension on that material at that point once you have removed the tension pin. Hold the tension collar in this position while turning the threaded spindle to the right until it comes to a stop. Place the threaded spindle in a vise, gripping it on the 1/2 inch diameter, figure 2, so the spindle is horizontal and mounting bracket is toward you. So at step 3, just to revisit this, viewing the pivot from the threaded end and with the mounting bracket toward you, turn the tension collar to the left or counterclockwise, okay, until it stops. So you have the pin removed. you're going to turn, with your hand, you're going to turn the tension collar counterclockwise. Then you're going to keep the tension collar between your thumb and forefinger, and then rotate the spindle clockwise to the right until it comes to a stop. You'll find the center point. You can turn either of them past that point, but then you're increasing spring tension, and you'll just want to find where they naturally stop without turning it further where it's obvious that it's going to come back to the position that you just had it in. Place the threaded spindle in a vise, gripping it on the 1/2-inch portion right here above. There's not much room there. It's like maybe 3/16 of an inch, but you'll get it onto a vise, and you won't pinch the threads. Gripping it on the 1/2-inch portion so the spindle is horizontal and mounting bracket is still toward you. Okay. Place the tension rod in tension collar hole near the top cover plate. So right near the shoulder, that's where you're going to insert the tension rod. You're going to turn it counterclockwise or towards you until spring tension is felt. Insert the tension pin into the hole in the tension collar close to the stop on the cover plate. Pin must be fully inserted into the hole with the shoulder of the pin against the tension collar to allow the spring tension to rotate the collar and tension pin towards the stop. So, insert the tension pin into the hole in the tension collar close to the stop on the cover plate. Okay, you've got it rotated counterclockwise. You're holding it under tension. Insert a pin. Pin must be inserted fully into the hole with the shoulder of the pin against the tension collar. Allow the spring tension to rotate the collar and tension pin towards the stop until the pin contacts the stop. Reinstall on the door. So a couple of things. The pin itself has a funny flattened end on it. That's the side that goes towards this portion. It's the only way that you can get it to fit down. And you might have to tap it down with a very small hammer to get it seated at that point. But there's one other thing that they don't mention here. When you have the unit in the vise, when you insert the tension rod and begin to move that, the entire body is going to want to move with you. So what should be done is the body, with one hand, the body should be held so it doesn't rotate with you. You turn the tension collar and then you drop a pin into the next revealed hole. Okay, that's the full description of what needs to happen. And then at that point, you're back to where you were. You have centered the tension collar counterclockwise and the spindle clockwise. You have put the spindle into a vise so that it can't turn. You're holding this with your hand so it can't turn. You're still at center. You increase tension and drop a pin. That's how that works. Maybe what we'll do is make a video on how to do that. It's probably what we'll do. Okay, let's wrap up this video on camera. And as you can see behind me, I've gone through the process of resetting that, reactivating the spring, because I will, after this, make a video on just how to do that. So, really fine quality item from Bommer. This is what the 646 satin nickel looks like on steel. Bommer has a logo down here on their item. Just a great quality product. I'm smiling because I'm an unabashed fan of Bommer in all regards. I've been to the plant, and I was just recounting in my head a couple of my fun instances of being at the factory, enjoying time spent with them and learning, quite frankly, their process. And also recounting, having been told Bommer's past, their storied past. The brothers Bommer, in about 1877 or so, literally invented the entire concept of the spring hinge, cloned, copied, and duplicated countless times over the decades. The name Bommer is quite synonymous with spring hinges in every possible variant. Of course, the ubiquitous double-acting spring hinge is a Bommer invention. That's the 3029, swings in and out. If you've been in a restaurant and that door goes in and out, it's probably a Bommer 3029 that's on there. They make single-acting spring hinges and then these funny derivatives of spring hinges as well. Having visited the plant, I can tell you that I have a very readjusted appreciation for just how much work it takes to actually manufacture a hinge. It's quite involved. Bommer also has a plating plant, a separate facility 10, 20 miles away, right across the Carolina border, basically, into South Carolina. And a fun fact about Bommer's plating plant is they are very proud that they can plate or finish about 33 different finishes. But the fun fact is that the waste that they eject from the plant is so clean that it's cleaner than the surrounding municipal water supply. So the water that you're going to drink out of your tap, bathe with, cook with, everything else with, what Bommer's byproduct is cleaner than the water in their area. That's a fact that they're quite proud of. One that I certainly am is the Bommer logo, and it doesn't say it on this because they don't have the room on here, but it would otherwise say Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. They are exclusively domestically manufactured. Their subcomponents are exclusively domestically manufactured. When they buy steel to make hinges, that's domestically manufactured, sourced steel. There is a link, that link below this video, to the Bommer manufacturer's page in our catalog. Will allow you to pull up the link to the manufacturer's site, all the Bommer products we sell, and then that full product catalog for you to review. Any questions on the 7112 and a 646 finish, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much.